Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lone Vic and welcome back to my channel. Today, as you can see by the box on the table, we will be diving into Detective City of Angels. This will be a how to play video for a competitive variant of this game from Ryder Games. This is a narrative game set in the 1940s in Los Angeles about detectives trying to solve various cases. It's a narrative game with a few game modes. You have a competitive mode in which one player in the role of the Chisel is pitted against up to 4 detectives who are striving to solve the case and be the first at it. There is an option of a cooperative variant where all the detectives are cooperating together to beat the Chisel and solve the case before the time runs out. There is also a solo and cooperative mode in which you can play against the game, so without any human opponents. So as you can see, options are many. And in this video, like I mentioned, we'll be dealing with the most attractive, in my opinion, competitive mode. We'll be going through the setup and the instructions on how to play the game. If you like the video and if you like what I'm doing here in my channel, you can support my channel and help it grow by clicking the like button under the video, hitting the subscribe button and ringing the notification bell to be notified about new videos on my channel. And if you're feeling like it, you can always buy me a cup of coffee. The link is in the description to this video. Now, in this video, I will be trying to avoid any spoilers for the first case that I will be setting up, which will be the tutorial case from this game. And on my channel, you will also find a video that explains the solo rules for the game, and it also contains a solo playthrough of the tutorial case, which will be full of spoilers. So if you want to check out how I did against the first case, you can find it there. So right now, without any further delay, let's dive into Detective City of Angels. Alright now guys, so here we are with the setup for this game. So I've placed the main elements already on the table, and you can see the huge game board with the map of LA divided into 5 districts. So we've got San Gabriel Valley, South Bay, Central LA, Hollywood and West Side. We have the board for a player, so this is the detective player board, as you can see, with the detective actions. It has also the sleuth or head-to-head mode on the other side, so this is the mode in which you are playing without a Chisel, so without this versus player, but we'll be using the normal side for this because this is the normal standard competitive mode. I'll be placing this board here where it doesn't cover any important information on the board. Here we have the Chisel board, which basically, as you can see, has only 2 instructions, block question and block snitch. We'll be talking about those actions for the Chisel, as you can see later on in this game. I also placed all the money tokens on the space here that's reserved for the money tokens on the map, and I've taken out the blood on the pier case, which is the first case. As you can see, the gumshoe green difficulty level in the box. So these are the main components that we need on the table, and now let's talk about all the other ones that we need. So first things first, you place the day marker, which is this black circular ring, on the appropriate number of days depending on the number of players, and you can have those numbers of days marked with hats. So for 4-player games, you will have 7 days to solve a case. For 3-player games, it's 8 days. For 2-player games, it's 9. And for a solo game, it will be 12 days. So let's say that I will be setting up a 4-player game, so we have 7 days. But for the tutorial case, this will be still shorter, and this will be described in the tutorial case book. First, we will talk about setting up the Chisel. The Chisel's most important component is this Chisel casebook and solutions. And as you can see, do not read any further unless you intend to play the role of the Chisel, because this book is full of spoilers. It has all of the cases described with the solutions and with the instructions for the Chisel. So don't look into it if you don't want to spoil yourself the game. So I will place this booklet off screen right now, and when we need it, we will get back to it. Then the Chisel takes the case box and empties it of all the necessary elements. And the Chisel should start by taking all of those cards with the alphabet letters A, B, C, D, E, and so forth and so on, and place them in the respective places, obviously face down on the board. So in this case, in Blood on the Pier, we've got up to G of cards. The Chisel should also take all of the response cards that are provided with the game, cover them with the arc sleeve so that nobody can peek at them, and place them near his board, near their board, because they will be using those later on. If the case comes with any search cards or any special cards, the Chisel places them next to their board as well, because they will be handing them out according to what the detectives do during the game. The Chisel also takes the evidence removed cards and evidence removed markers, which have alphabet letters, and places them in his supply. And finally, takes all the suspect standees that are included in the case, places them in the plastic bases, and also takes them into their supply. The Chisel should have all of those components kept as much secret as possible, so as not to spoil and not to give any hints to any players. There was an expansion for this game providing a screen for the Chisel to hide all the information, which is a pretty cool addition. I don't know if it's still available, but you can look for it. And now we are done with the Chisel setup. We can go to the detectives right now. So each detective will require a detective casebook, which is this brown casebook which only has the introductions to all the cases, along with any special rules that the detectives require. And after deciding on the player color, take the detective board, their respective meanie with the base in the same color, 4 action markers which are placed on the spaces of available actions on the detective board over here, 8 leverage markers in the form of those plastic hats which can be placed somewhere nearby, 8 wooden knowledge markers which look like badges, let's say, and also place them nearby, and also 3 tokens, 2 snitch tokens in the player color and 1 solve token in the player color. Each detective must hand over one of their leverage markers to the Chisel and place them on the Chisel board. So in a 4-player game, the Chisel will have 1 hat, 1 leverage marker of every player color on there. And the detective who is the first player will take $4 of cash and place them on their board at the start of the game. The second detective will take 5, the third will take 6, and the fourth detective will take $9 worth of cash and puts them on their player board. And now we have the detectives ready as well, so let's talk about preparing the case, which are the last steps that are being taken. So now at this point, the Chisel will open their case book and read through the case, that's in this case Blood on the Pier, and as they are reading the case, and the detectives can follow this in their case books as well because they have the same description, the Chisel will be placing all of the suspects that are mentioned in the description on the appropriate locations on the map, and also flipping some of the cards A, B, C, D, E, F, G as instructed in this description. And this will begin the initial state of the game. So to avoid too many spoilers, this case should look like this after reading the introduction. The Chisel book will also say to place the crime scene marker in a space on the map as well. So this red circle represents the place where the crime happened. And this tutorial scenario of Blood on the Pier mentions that for 4-player games, the detectives have only 4 days to solve the case, so I will move the day marker down to 4. Lastly, each detective should receive a sheet for their case, and this sheet will have space for information and final guesses that the detective is going to make, and also a space for notes. So in this space for notes, the detectives will be taking notes of all the cards, A, B, C, D, E, F, G in the case of this first investigation, and also will be taking down notes about the names of the suspects, and they will be able to note down the answers to questions that they will be asking to the suspects about specific items. So those should be kept secret as well, because this knowledge will be key to solving the case before all the other detectives. And now we are ready to start talking about how to play this game like I said, without any spoilers. And I will also mention that if you would like to provide yourself with the best playing experience for this game, you can check out the Foreteller app, which provides recordings for the red narrative for the game done in a professional way. And this is a very cool add-on to this game that kind of sets the whole mood and helps immerse yourselves better in the gameplay as well. So I'm using it and I highly recommend it. So let's talk about the general overview of this game. So each case in Detective City of Angels will last a number of days. Each day, each detective will be able to perform 4 actions, and then the turn passes to the next detective clockwise. Once all detectives perform all of their actions, the day ends and we start a new day and we reset all the actions and do everything again. The first detective who decides that they have enough clues in order to identify the trifecta of answers that are needed to solve the case can do so at the beginning of their turn before taking any actions by spending their solve token, and each detective can do it only once. So if you, for example, decide at the beginning of your turn that you think you know who did it and you know the answers to all the questions in the case, you can spend the token and solve the case before everyone else. But if you spend the token and you are wrong, then you cannot try again to solve the case until the day marker lands on the final guess space, where each detective will have a last chance to guess unless somebody did it before. And if nobody guesses and solves the case at this point, the Chisel wins the game. So those are basically the winning conditions. There are a few key concepts in this game that we need to mention before we go into the details. So there are a few terms that you have to understand. So if somebody says that a detective has knowledge of a case card, one of those on the top, that means that they have seen it, so they were able to peek under the card without anybody else seeing it, and they are able to place their knowledge marker under the card, which symbolizes that from then on they can peek at this card at any point in the game because they already have knowledge of this evidence. But whoever doesn't have a knowledge marker under this card cannot peek under this card. Once all the detectives participating in the case have a knowledge marker under one specific card, you can flip this card face up because, well, everybody knows about it, so it can become public knowledge. The second term that is a key phrase in this game is the most useful response. Detectives will be questioning suspects during their game, asking them about different clues and different case cards that we have on the top of the page, and the Chisel will be selecting one of a few responses that they can provide to the detectives. And the best response that the detective can receive from the Chisel when asking a question is called the most useful response. And this response is always truthful. And there is only one single most useful response for each suspect for each question. But there can be a few lies or misdirections accompanying it for the Chisel to choose from. So this is a concept that's a bit tricky to understand at first, but as the games go, you will get used to it the most. The most useful response doesn't mean that this response will provide you with any details, because sometimes the suspect might basically not know anything about the thing that you are asking them of, and this will be their most useful response. And you have to decide whether this is true. But sometimes the Chisel will be choosing a lie or a misdirection, but there will be something that the suspect is hiding from you, and then you'll have to decide that you have to press them further. Challenging is another term that you will be using in this game, and challenging is exactly that. When you ask a question, and we'll be talking about it in detail during the turn overview, when you are asking a question and the Chisel gives you a response, you have to decide whether you are challenging the response or not. So whether you think that this is not the most useful response that the Chisel might be giving you, and that the suspect is really holding something back from you. Leverage, represented by the leverage tokens, is the action of forcing the chisel by the detectives who have leverage over suspects to give the most truthful answer, the most useful response, whether the chisel wants it or not. But also, if the chisel has leverage over the players, they can force them to disregard a question by blocking a question or maybe blocking a snitch action. So this will also be coming in play further on. And the last concept that we need to talk about is evidence taken and removed. So during the course of the game, some detectives may be instructed to take evidence from here. And this means that this detective will physically remove the case card from the city board and place it next to their detective board. And this evidence removed card that the chisel has right now will be placed instead of this card, and with a knowledge token of that detective to symbolize who removed the evidence card and who has access to it. And this will also mean that the detectives who didn't look at the card will not have access to it in any other means in the game than through the detective who owns this proof right now, but we'll go back to this in a lot of detail. So we know how to win the game, we know some key phrases, we know how the turns go, so let's right now start with the first turn and talk about what detectives can do exactly in this game. So at the very beginning of the first day, each detective will have to decide which police station they want to start their game at. And police stations are marked with this blue space on the board. So I will place my character here and I will start my first day over here. So over the course of the day, you have a lot of actions to choose from, like move, question, search location, search suspect, analyze, and kickback. But you can take only 4 of those actions, and you can take those actions more than once a turn. So let's go through those actions one by one right now, and we'll start with the simplest ones and we will leave the most complicated for the end. If you move your action token into the move action, that means that you can move your character from your current location to any other location in your district. So for example, if I'm standing here on space 51, which is LA Police Department headquarters, I can move anywhere within that district and also into the location with one of my suspects or the other, because this location is at the edge of the district, so this is a legal move as well. However, if I want to move into another district, which is neighboring the one that I'm in currently, I will need to spend 2 move actions. The first one in order to move to any location that borders both districts that I'm moving from and moving to, and then the second action to move into any location in my new district. So ultimately, you'll be able, for example, if you have no other ideas or no better ideas, you'll be able to move 4 times during a single day if you don't want to do anything, but that's how movement actions work. Detectives can occupy the same space as other detectives. You can also occupy the space with a suspect. There are no limitations here. Now, let's jump through the question action right now and let's go into the search location action at this point. Now, whenever a detective lands in any location, whether it's a location with a suspect or a crime scene or anything else, they can decide that they want to search that location. When this happens, the Chisel takes their case book with the solutions. They take a look at the search results table at the end of the case, usually, and they take a look whether the number of the location is connected with any specific card or action. This table is comprehensive. So for example, as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations that will provide the detectives with something, maybe, or in some cases with nothing really, and all other locations will, for example, give them 1 money. So the Chisel checks whether anything happens in those locations, and if a location is connected to a specific card, the Chisel looks through the deck of search cards, finds the card with the appropriate number of locations, and hands it to the detective in question. Now, if the card has this word archive in the lower right corner, the detective, after reading this card, should place this card face down in the archives, meaning that if anybody else is going to search that location, this card is no longer available for them. The next action that the detective can perform is search suspect. And this can happen only at a location when a detective is sharing with a suspect standee. And when you are doing this, the Chisel again goes back to the Chisel casebook, takes a look at the suspect table, and checks whether there are any actions next to the suspects that are being searched in the result column and performs that. This sometimes may reveal a card or give knowledge of a card to any player, or for example might provide the player with a specific card from the search deck. Next, there is an analyze action, which basically means that the detective spends some time thinking about the case, and each action spent this way earns the detective $1. So this money is useful sometimes, so it's worth to have those dollars, and if you don't have any, you can earn them this way. And we'll talk about how to spend this money later on. And then there is also kickback, which can be done once per turn and only in those orange locations that are marked as mob joints. And if you are in this orange location, you can use the kickback action and receive the amount of money equal to all the players playing the game, including the Chisel. So in a 5-player game, when there's 1 Chisel and 4 detectives, each kickback will give you $5, which is quite a lot. So now let's move on to the question action, which is the most important action in the game, because this will be providing you with the evidence and with information needed to solve the case. Now, questioning a suspect has a few steps. So first, the action of questioning can be done only when your detective or when the player's detective is in the same space as a suspect. If they are, they can spend 1 action to question the suspect and ask 1 question to this suspect about any of the cards that are face up in the top row, or any cards that this detective has knowledge of. So they have either their knowledge token under this card on the main board, or they have this card in their possession because they have taken it off of the board and put it next to their player board, which will be symbolized once again by this evidence removed card placed instead of that original card by the Chisel. So once you decide who you want to ask and about which card, and each action only provides you with 1 question, you have to announce it out loud, because all other players, all other detectives sitting around the table may decide whether they want to use a snitch token. And each player, after hearing who you are asking and about what, secretly chooses whether to pass or bribe the snitch. Bribing a snitch is one of the actions that you will be spending money on, and it costs $3 or free scratch using the game terminology. So if you don't have this kind of money on you right now, you won't be able to bribe the snitch and you will have to choose the pass option. But if you choose the bribe option, you will see what happens in a moment. Each player decides which token they want, apart from the player who is asking the question, obviously. Place the token face down so that nobody sees the decision, and then the question is handed over to the Chisel. The Chisel opens up their casebook and solutions, takes a look at the table for this case, locates the suspect, so we've got rows for each suspect according to this, locates the column corresponding to the card that you are asking a question about, and as you can see, you have sometimes only 1 answer in the corresponding box, or sometimes 2 or 3 answers. The black answer is the most truthful or most useful response, while the red ones are lies and misdirections. And it's up to the Chisel to choose 1 of those options, how many there would be, and provide it to the player. And this is done in the following form. The Chisel chooses which option they want to give to the player from the box that was being asked about. they take a look at the number next to the response, they find that number card in their response cards, and those have 4 different responses on them with letters of the alphabet. So you have to find the corresponding one, like for example 3D or 3B. Place it so in the response arc that only the answer that you are interested in giving is seen, and pass it over to the player who is doing the questioning so that only they can see it. The player then takes a look at the answer, and they have to decide whether this is the most useful response and they cannot get anything else on this topic from that suspect, or whether this is a lie or misdirection by the chisel. And this is the step in which the detective can challenge the chisel's answer. So if you challenge an answer, you provide the chisel with your leverage token, and the chisel, if you challenged the answer unsuccessfully, so this was the most useful answer and you still challenged it, the chisel will keep your leverage token for them and they will be able to use it later. But if you have successfully challenged the answer, so this wasn't the most useful answer, the chisel places this leverage token of yours under the proper suspect card. So for example, in this case, it was Charlie Muggs who was being questioned, and you will be able to use this leverage token later on. And then the chisel has to provide you with the most useful answer for this question. So they will have to tell you the truth if you challenged them correctly. And after this happens, so if you decide whether you're challenging or not, and you got the most useful response or not based on this decision, all the other players reveal their tokens for the snitch, and all players who bribed the snitch pay the $3, and then they can look at the response that you've gotten as well. So if you challenged the snitch correctly, those players will also see the most useful response or the most truthful response. If, however, you didn't challenge the snitch, or you challenged the snitch incorrectly and you failed with the challenge, those players will see the response that you got, and they will basically know the same information that you got to know. Okay, so now why are leverage tokens important? Leverage tokens are one of the most useful tools in the game, and detectives use the leverage that they acquire against the suspects for successfully challenging the chisel in order to force the chisel to give the most useful response to the question that they will be asking. So for example, if I had one leverage against Charlie Muggs right now, and I was using another action to ask him another question, I would be able to take this leverage from Charlie Muggs in order to give me the most useful answer. So the chisel cannot lie or misdirect in this case. And additionally, if I am choosing while asking the question to use my leverage token, all the other players cannot use their snitch tokens to peek at that question, no matter if they can afford it or not. What happens when the chisel has some leverage tokens over the detectives? The chisel has 2 options to spend those tokens and return them to the detectives. One, they can spend a leverage token in order to block a question that the detective is asking, and the detective will need to ask this question on the next turn, so they won't be able to ask the same question on this day again, so they will have to basically ask a new question if they want to ask again using another action. Or the chisel can use this leverage token to block a snitch, which means that this detective that the chisel spent the leverage token for will not be able to use their snitch tokens in order to bribe. And the chisel doesn't know. Maybe that detective didn't want to bribe a snitch for this question. Maybe they wanted to pass. But spending this leverage token, they are forced to pass by the chisel. And this is it. Those are all the actions that the players can do during the game. And remember that you have 4 actions that you will be performing out of all of those, and you can repeat the same action a few times. We have 2 more things to talk about before we go to winning the game and how to end the game, basically. The first thing is what specifically happens when somebody takes a card from those case cards over here. So the first thing is that if a detective collects a card because the game tells them to, and they take the card for them, and the chisel places an evidence removed card with the knowledge marker of that player who is now in possession of the card, nobody else can access this card through the normal means during the game. Additionally, the chisel also takes the evidence removed marker with the same letter as on the card, so in my case it was G, and places it 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, below the current day marker. And this means that once the marker reaches this space, this evidence that the player has access to will become revealed for everybody. So this detective will only have some head start on this evidence, but finally this will be public knowledge. If there are, however, less than 3 days left, so you can't place the token on the last space, then you don't place the token at all, and the detectives will have to use other means to get access to this card. So what are those other means? There are some options of spending the money on the card, and this is the last thing that we need to talk about. So you know already about the snitch, connected with the snitch tokens and costing you 3 scratch. There is also the goon that costs you 2 scratch. And this goon is pretty useful as well, because if the chisel uses one of your leverage tokens to block you from asking a question this round, you can pay $2 if you have them to the goon to force the suspect to answer the question. The chisel can still lie or misdirect, but their blocking of the question was basically annulled in this way. There is also the detective action, which also costs 2 scratch, and this means that you'll be bribing another detective to see a case card that they have knowledge of. So knowledge of means that that detective has their knowledge token below the card, or they have this card in their possession, like for example this one. So this is another way. If you don't want to wait those 3 days for this card to be public, you can bribe the detective. Or for example, if there are less than 3 days until the end of the game, this is your only way to find out about this evidence that somebody else took. The only drawback here is that you need to be in the same location as the detective that you are bribing, and the target detective receives this 2 scratch. So you're basically paying another player for this information. The last option is bribing an officer. Similarly to bribing a detective, but instead of paying this money to the detective that has the information, you are basically throwing the money into the bank, so you're paying to the officer at the police station. And yes, this action can only be performed when you are located in a police station. And basically, this is it. So those are all the possible actions that you can take and all the things that you can do in a game of Detective City of Angels. Now let's talk about what happens when somebody wants to guess or solve the case and what happens where the game ends. So usually, if you want to solve the case before the game ends, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, you need to do it at the start of your turn before you perform any actions. And you use this solve box over here in order to note down which suspect you think committed the murder. And you identify the suspects by the letters on their case card. So we've got suspect B, C, or D, because A is a victim card over here. You use a weapon card, so weapons will also be here, possible murder weapons, and you have to decide which one is that. And you also have to put in a motive. And you can find a whole list of motives on the reverse side of your detective casebook. And those are motives, for example, like accident, anger, rage, drug-related, mob-related, etc., etc. And you have to decide on those 3 information. You pass them on to the chisel secretly, and the chisel will look at them, compare them to the answers that they have in their chisel case. If you guessed all 3 correctly, you win the game because you were the first. However, if you did not guess all of them correctly, the chisel will put a number here, which means how many correct answers you had, but the chisel won't tell you which ones. So for example, they can put 1 or 2 in here, telling you that you had 2 right, but one was wrong, and you didn't win just yet because you didn't guess everything correctly. And if you did that, you also needed to pass your solve token to the Chisel, because if you didn't guess correctly, you will only be able to guess on the final guess turn after all the days have passed and nobody else managed to guess the case. At that point, every detective can give one final guess to the Chisel, and if anybody guesses, they will win the game. If nobody guesses, well, the Chisel wins because they were good at misleading the detectives and basically hiding the clues, and, well, they outsmarted them. Okay, guys, so I think this wraps up the game pretty well. I hope that this sheds some light on how you play and what is Detective of City of Angels all in all. And it's, like I said, one of my favorite, if not the favorite, narrative game of all times. If you would like to see how to play it solo, what are the rules, and if you want to take a look at how I managed with the first case for you guys, you can check out another video on my channel for the solo playthrough. And hopefully this video helped you out in any way, or maybe encouraged you to look for this game from Ryder Games, and maybe you would like to own it as well, because, like I said, swell piece of game. If you liked this video, if you want to help my channel grow, and if you want to support what I'm doing here, click the like button under the video, hit the subscribe button, and ring the notification bell to be notified about new videos that are coming on my channel on a regular basis. And if you would like to, well, buy me a cup of coffee, there's a link in the description to this video. For now, I am wrapping this up, and, well, see you soon in another of my videos here on my channel. My name is Lone Vic. This was Detective, the City of Angels, how to play video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Have a great day. Bye-bye. See you soon.